love the channel and find it useful in becoming a happy retiree. Subscribe today. A reality check for the retail. So there's just this continued talk about the retail apocalypse, and it is very real. If you're a retailer, if you own a store, particularly a clothing store for teens, you know, listen, it's tough to even stay in business in America right now. But there's a lot behind this economic carnage, and you hear in the headlines all of the stores that you and I both know, and you think to yourself, man, what is happening? There's no way the economy can be any good when you hear every store that you've known since you've grown up as a child has been getting shut down by the hundreds. When you hear, oh, well, they closed all 175 stores, you think, wow, this economy's got to be tough. And some of the carnage you get, Sears, Kmart, you know, you get that a little bit. Oh, there's too many of them, number one. Number two, they're not great experiences. Number three, Americans have shifted to the experiential shopping. We are consumers, and consumerism in America isn't dead. It's just really shifting. And that's crushing retail stores. So you go from the JC Pennys and the Sears and the Kmarts of the world, all the stores we've known growing up as kids, and our parents and our grandparents for the most part, and you hear them they lock the doors, they clear the parking lots. That's unsettling. But then it spreads to places that your kids know, and maybe even your grandchildren know. Okay, well, this store called Wet Seal, what is that? I don't know. I think maybe I've seen it in the mall. It looks like a terrible store. But for a preteen or a tweener or a teen, maybe it was a great store at one point. It's not anymore. So you hear stores like Wet Seal and BCBG and BB and Abercrombie and Guess, and they're closing hundreds and hundreds of stores. In some cases, they're closing everything and they're just going out of business. Now, a lot of these are bankruptcies. In the case of Radio Shack, where they're closing 500, let's see here. Radio Shack filed for bankruptcy for the second time recently, closing 552 of its stores. Now, remember, that's not all of their stores. That's about 40% of their stores. So bankruptcy gives these stores a chance to try to get rid of some of the debt and try to come back and survive. But this carnage has just been continuing to spread. GameStop closing 150 locations. Crocs, those weird little shoes. Again, one of the businesses you wonder, well, how is that really going to stay in business? Why can't 10 other people do the exact same thing and just push Crocs out of the way? Well, to some extent, that's happening. So the thoughts that you've had from a retail perspective, you know, why is that store in business? That's a terrible place. You know what? You were right. It was a terrible place, and it's mostly going away. And that's the economic reality of our time. But it doesn't mean the consumer is going away. So if you really dig into the consumer numbers, and this is one of the things I love to do. I love to take a headline problem, and this is a perfect example. Well, retail in America is dead. Thousands of stores are closing. All the names you know going out of business. That means the death of American shopping, the death of the consumer. That's not the story. So I love taking one of these really prominent headlines that everybody already agrees about and then diving into all the numbers behind that. So if you take a look at what we're spending as a country in terms of how many tens or hundreds of billions of dollars on experiences and goods and bars and restaurants and retail or direct marketing, or of course, e-commerce, which now is a giant piece of that equation. If you really look at the numbers now, you can see what's really happening under the surface or in the ecosystem, or what's happening within the aquarium that's impacting the rest of the aquarium. And that's this story behind retail in America. And I'm going to talk about those numbers today. I've been writing about it this past week, and I'll publish this too in my next AJC column, and we'll continue to publish on wesmoss.com about this. And we'll try to help you understand what's happening with retail in America. Because really, we've got to get back to one of the few overarching things or fundamental principles that really matters. Remember, Folks, there's not that many pieces of the pie that really matter when it comes to investing. It comes down to a strong economy, and it comes down to corporate earnings. And those two, over time, run hand in hand. You cannot have one without the other for an extended period of time. And if you can't have a U.S. consumer that's doing well, if you have a country that is, the 4 of the 5 pistons of the engine are you and I as consuming and moving forward in an economy, and each generation getting better and better and continuing to spend and continuing to grow. If you don't have that, then you don't have the growth of the corporate side of the world, which is the equity side of the world, which is what you and I invest in. So we've got to have all those pieces in line together in order to continue to have an economy that you and I have faith in to invest in for the next 10 and 20 and 30 and 50 and 100 years. And that's why we're here. So that's why I think it's so important, and it's fundamentally to keep an eye on the very foundation of where we're putting our money as investors. So what happened this week? Of course, that we hit news all over the place. Markets down about 0.5% on the week, and we've had really a very solid year. Volatility in U.S. stocks has hit since the VIX came out, and let's call it for about over the last approximately 40 years, the last couple of weeks, the last 3 weeks of stock trading, really 2 weeks to be exact, has been the lowest ebb that we have seen. If you go back and look at the numbers, you've heard about these store closings. I mean, GameStop, 150 locations, Crocs, 150 of 550 stores, Radio Shack, 552 stores, JC Penny, Sears, Kmart, BB, BCBG, Wet Seal, Abercrombie, Guess. I mean, the list just keeps going. Thousands of retail stores are closing. Some of them are going out of business completely. Some of them are restructuring. Some of them just are paring back because they overbuilt. If you really do the math, and here's what's happening, though. The U.S. consumer isn't spending less. They're spending more. They're just spending more in a very different way. Think of this staggering statistic. And I graphed this on the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, has a wonderful way to look through economic data. In the graph I did this week, we see experience, so retail trade, food service, and drinking places. So going out to eat, going out to have a drink, that's gone from $320 billion a year in 2000 to $650 billion in 2017. That's experience shopping. Look at what's happened to department stores, though. And I charted this from the year 2000. Department store sales have just continued to go down. E-commerce sales have continued to go up. So I did this starting back in really the year 2000. If you look at a chart, you'll see that department store sales went from 200, back in 2000, department store sales were 232 billion. E-commerce sales were 27. That's it. As of the end of last year, department store sales down to 154 billion. So down something like $80 billion. E-commerce sales have gone from 27 billion to $344 billion. So down 80 in department stores, up about 320 billion. So just a staggering shift in where and how we buy. The U.S. consumer is still alive and well. Be careful of reading too far into these headlines. Hi, I'm Wes Moss, and thanks for taking a minute to hear about what's so different about my new book, You Can Retire Sooner Than You Think. So unlike other retirement books, this book will give you a step-by-step guide, whether you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, to learn from what these successful and happy retirees did to get there. I hope you enjoy the book, but more importantly, I know that it'll help you retire sooner than you think.